Welcome to today's webinar from CEC. We are live from Lab 46. This will be around a 25 minute presentation, and I am your host, Garrett Chumbley. Today, Stan Moberg, our general manager for our AV division, is with us. How you doing, Stan?
Doing great. Yourself?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. Thanks. Now, before we get into the technical side, I wouldn't mind talking a little bit about your background, because you have a very interesting background. Could you elaborate a little bit on that?
Sure. So I come to CEC by way of the broadcast news industry. I worked a little bit in local TV and while I was in college at the NBC affiliate in Des Moines, Iowa, and then moved on to work for CNN for 11 years out of Atlanta, Georgia.
That is interesting. Do you have any really good story or something that you find was a fond memory from that experience?
Oh yeah, lots of great memories along the way. And fun people, interesting, really fascinating people that I met from all around the world.
Like Larry King.
Like Larry King, yeah. I met him. I think probably the coolest things, one that good old Ted Turner did for everybody at CNN. He liked to celebrate the anniversaries, and so at CNN's 20th birthday and 25th birthday, they threw huge parties, brought in live performers. The first one, the 20th, was Diana Ross, and for the 25th was Hall & Oates. And so you'd see all of these, notable people that everybody sees on CNN every day, dancing in the aisles and just having a good time, enjoying some good music and celebrating. They're even like foreign dignitaries and things there. So it's a strange mix of people, but a lot of fun.
Oh, sure. I can see that. One of the things that you talked about earlier, which was, and I'm a big movie buff, you mentioned that Anchorman was filmed in the same building that you were stationed out of?
CNN Center is in a central part of downtown Atlanta there, and Anchorman 2, there are parts of that were filmed there, and at Centennial Olympic Park right across the road. But it's pretty cool. Anchorman's kind of a big deal in that world. Everybody
kind of a big deal, right?
Yes, kind of a big deal.
Excellent. Well, before we get into our presentation, I think so there's some key challenges that I face, and I know that you face that as well, which is just general confidence in the AV experience. I think the overall efficiency of an AV system, and just the total experience, whether it's from customers or visitors or from employees. Can you talk a little bit about some of those challenges?
Sure. So one of the key things that we at CEC are working through are finding new ways to simplify systems for end users. And what that does is give end users the confidence to walk into a room and know how it's going to work and have the expectation that it will fire up the minute they touch a button, and they can get off with their meeting and enjoy a flawless and timely meeting.
That would be very nice. All right, Stan, you ready to talk some tech?
Let's do it.
All right, let's go. All right, so the topic of today is simple smart rooms. And I don't know about you, but sometimes I feel like the room is smarter than I am. Is that close?
They're very perceptive.
Okay.
They know what's going on, and that's one of the great things that we look to in exactly what I was talking about a minute ago is this simplification, ease of use. And those rooms, they're smart enough to know who you are, how long you're going to be in the room, what you need them to do. Do you need the lights on? Do you need the blinds closed? Do you need microphones and cameras to work? And where do they need to go? They track the speaker in a room with the microphones, or oftentimes tracking microphones, and they'll tell the camera where to move as well. They know everything about you and what your needs are, and that's only going to continue to improve, and we'll see greater involvement in technology down the road.
Okay, so not every conference room is a smart room, right? Even though it has a control panel?
Yeah, there are rooms that I would, we'll use the word dumb, even though I tell my 8-year-old kid don't use that word. Yeah, there are rooms, if you just see a phone on a table, it's a conference room, I would say that's a room like that. Yeah. Okay. So if you bring in technology, it can accomplish the same thing as a phone room, but with added benefits. So you can have cameras, microphones, displays. You can share content that's the value of a smart room over a dumb room.
A dumb room, right? So, what are some of the biggest misconceptions as it relates to the AV world?
Probably the biggest misconception, it's something we hear a lot. It's that AV should be a secondary or tertiary priority because it doesn't contribute to the bottom line, and in many cases. And what I say to that is that it couldn't be farther from the truth, because if you have confidence in your technology, if you know you can walk into a conference space and hit a button and it's going to go right away, and you're off and running and being productive in your meeting, you're saving time hand over fist over and over again. So if you think of it this way, imagine you have 10 rooms, and I think we've got a slide that helps illustrate this, but if you've got 10 rooms, 10 conference spaces that you're using every day, and they're booked up 8 hours a day, and you're going through with, say, an average of 4 people, four participants in each meeting, and you run that out. It's 20 minutes each meeting. If you have an average delay of 5 minutes per meeting,
Which is easily done.
easily, and I've seen studies done where there are 11-minute delays in starting meetings across large enterprise campuses. And so if you do that math and you run that out, you quickly see that you get over $200,000 a year in inefficiencies. When you're talking about, average corporate salaries around $30 an hour, and it's just a lot of time that goes to waste when you've got people fumbling for cables. Which one do I plug in? Can they hear me on the far end? Can they see me? And vice versa. Did I hit the right button? Did I give them the dial-in number? Things like that. So much easier when you can come in and hit one button, and that's what we're working toward. So that's actually what we've developed here at CEC, is the ability to hit one button, your meeting starts, and away you go. You don't have that 5-minute delay that racks up all that time over years. And you can imagine if you extrapolate that over a year with higher salaries, you get into executive salaries, and maybe a campus that has hundreds of rooms as opposed to just 10. Very quickly, you see the value in AV.
Now that's very enlightening.
Technology, yes.
I think, and I don't know about you, but I have some misconception from AV. So I'm from the security space. So here's my chance to pick on the AV side a little bit. But my misconception of AV is that I thought everybody in the AV world had long hair. And I see
this
guy. I see that you don't have any.
No, I gave up that fight about 20 years ago.
So was that pre-CNN or post-CNN?
Oh, pre-CNN.
Not post-CDC, obviously, because we're a stress-free environment.
That's right.
Okay. Well, I think we actually even have a slide that shows.
What, you've been talking to my mom to get pictures?
So business in the front, party in the back.
Yeah.
All right.
That was many years ago. Looking good there, young man.
Well, we'll keep moving here, but I think to start our conversation a little bit more in depth as far as the technology goes, I'm curious to see what is the average life cycle of an AV system.
Sure. So many of the components have different lifespan. If you look at displays, it's commonly roughly 4 years if you're looking at an 80-inch TV on a wall, you can expect them to live about 4 years. The controllers, the brains of the system, about that as well, 3 to 5 years max on that. But some of the components you get into, and you're looking at 8 years. Speakers, microphones, those are things that don't tend to get a lot of wear and tear unless they're abused, and so they'll last 8 to 10 years. What we find anymore is that the technology advances more quickly than the lifespan does, and so we look at refresh rates to maintain pace with the technology now. So one of the great things at CEC that we've recently implemented is an MSP program, a managed systems program, where we can offer on a 3 and 5 year plan the latest technology on a refresh cycle, again for 3 and 5 years. So if you say, hey CEC, I'm interested in new technology in our space, and we really would like to be able to keep up with the technology, as it advances and improves, we can do that for you. So we come in and install the latest and greatest now. And of course, there's engineering that goes into the whole process and everything. But we bring out the latest and greatest now, and then 3 to 5 years, you call us and say, hey, we want the latest and greatest now. 3 years later, and we'll make that happen. It's really pretty good. It's an interesting concept that's just catching on in the AV world, and we feel like we're leading the curve on that.
Well, it sounds like it's an easy button for managing your
Absolutely,
systems,
yeah.
which can be very complicated. Yeah, I think that's some of the roadblocks that we hear about is just the complication from upgrading all of our existing platform, because it is complicated. And I just got used to it. Now I need to move on to the next level. And so I think that program sounds extremely interesting. So now, as the customers have a system that's been installed for 5 years, what are some of the advancements that's taken place over that last 5 years that they might not be taking advantage of?
So what we're seeing now, or what we've traditionally seen, 5 years ago, was that pretty much every system required a 6-foot rack and a separate space that it could exist in. And so you're talking about pulling cable from one room to another. You're talking about having a large bundle of cables up on the table to the user interface, and a whole bunch of equipment that fills that 6-foot rack. Now you're talking about a much smaller footprint and impact on the infrastructure. You're talking about a small rack that can fit underneath the table, or maybe you don't even need a rack that can just be mounted within a leg. You're talking about a user interface that employs maybe a single cable, maybe no cables. So really have minimized the impact on the environments that systems are deployed within.
So does that also minimize the impact to my budget?
It can. And
Yeah.
so as I mentioned, you're looking at systems where you don't have a cable pull that goes from one space to another. Oftentimes, what we call an IDF closet is on the other side of a building. So you can imagine there's a lot of labor in that. So if you remove the need for that, and everything is self-contained within a single room, then that removes a lot of labor expense.
That's very interesting. I think one of the things that our customers really appreciate is, we've talked about that last 5 years. I think they want to hear about, what does the next 5 years bring in? What's the next big thing in the AV world?
So there are some pretty cool things coming about. We're starting to see that AI is going to play a big part in some of the meeting technology, conference technology. Think about going into a room, hitting that button, the room fires up, and it knows who you are. It knows who the participants in the room are, and it knows when they're actually there. It takes attendance for you, and it takes notes. So voice to text.
The one thing that nobody likes to do.
The one thing that nobody likes to do. And then the next thing that nobody likes to do is dole out tasks.
Totally, yeah.
It will identify actionable items for you, and then assign them to those who need to execute.
Interesting.
Yeah. Some other things that we see coming down the pipe would be things like 5G and CBRS. So CBRS is like Wi-Fi internet on steroids. It can reach distances much greater than what we're using now as far as Wi-Fi and with typical wireless access points that we see deployed now. You're talking about covering entire campuses with maybe 2 access points.
Instead of 20 or 30?
Instead of 20, 30, 50, 100, yeah. So much stronger signal. And then, you look at that, what that does is give some agility, some mobility to, you think about some teams that you see that operate on different areas on the floor of a building, or want that mobility that, oh, hey, we're gonna have a meeting over here today, or we need to take this meeting into a shared space or an atrium area or whatever. They can actually wirelessly maintain their connection and have a very strong signal.
That's very nice. And just real quick, so as this month's meeting is on AV, in April, Troy McDermott will be joining us for our next session, and he will be talking specifically about CBRS, and that is actually in April. So Sorry, Stan, for that plug. Go ahead and continue.
No, so really, truly, what we look at is some advancements like that coming down the pipe with 5G and CBRS. They're just really going to help with the mobility of conference systems. You'll have a stronger signal that can handle the bandwidth of video conferencing on a wireless level.
Yeah, that sounds interesting. So now we got the technology. We know what happened in the last 5 years. We know what's coming up. So as a decision maker, how do we prepare ourselves to modernize these platforms?
Sure. I think the most important thing to do if you reach a point where you're looking or even thinking about integrating or updating your AV systems, involve us in a conversation. We've got a lot of pointers and tips that and ways to gather information that not everybody's going to think about, and a lot of impacts that we don't always consider. Even myself, I'm the AV general manager, but I'm not an engineer. And so when guys come to me and say, "Hey, I'm looking to implement a system," I immediately say, "Okay, let's involve the engineering team so we can talk to them," and they'll recognize things like network impact. They'll recognize things like infrastructure impact. What do we need for conduit? What do we need for power? What do we need for network? I guess I said that already, but things like structural conflicts. In the ceiling, you never know where you're going to open up a ceiling and run into ductwork. You never know if an architect is going to like what a speaker looks like. If you've got a pendulum speaker, pendulum microphones, or something that's going to impact the overall look in a room. These are the things that the engineering teams are constantly thinking about and considering. Not to mention, there's just a lot of deliberation that goes into our systems. I like to tell people around here, it's not flipping burgers, and not to demean anyone that's flipping burgers, but let me rephrase that. It's not me at home making a grilled cheese sandwich and burning it. It's very involved, and it can be very complicated. So we like to give our engineering teams as much time as possible, as much information up front. And so the more we can involve them in your process up front, the better off the entire process will be at the end.
And I think, I've met some of your people. It just sounds like you have a huge army of smart people back behind you, or like the AV Jedi.
Yeah.
So when I think when you're looking at a value differentiator between us, I think your approach that you laid out, I think we talked about it earlier, which you're really trying to understand, where the customer wants to go before you decide what they need. I think that's priceless. So, go ahead.
And one of the other things that the engineers do to demonstrate just kind of the tedium that they dig into, think about what we call visual acuity. There's a formula that's applied. So you think about in a given space what the farthest viewer away from the display is, and then what the level of detail that you want to be able to see on the screen. And so there are three different numbers applied to the formula. And if you're talking about high level of detail, like spreadsheets, and you're an accounting firm and you need to be able to see little tiny numbers from a great distance, there's a measurement that we'll take and a calculation that we'll do, and we'll say, okay, this is the size of display that you need to function properly and to give you the proper visual acuity. But if you're just looking at general web browsing, there's another formula that's applied, and so on. So these are the levels of details, and they'll consider acoustics in a room,
and your team will do all that for me.
Our team will do it all.
Okay, excellent. Well, excellent. Well, I think that kind of wraps up our conversation today. So, a couple key themes is, when you look at the advancements that's taken place over the 5 years, they sound great. I really like the next step. The fact of the note taking and the dictation and doling out action items that nobody likes to do. And I think that if it's done right, what I was hearing about it actually improves the confidence, the efficiency, as well as the overall experience of working with that technology. I think starting with the discovery meeting, to your point earlier, and really understanding where the customer would like to go, I thought that was really good. So again, I would like to thank our production team of Angie Worrell, Chris Wood, and Sharisa Byers, as well as some support from Randy Montelius. And I would like to thank you, the audience, for participating. Stan, I definitely want to thank you. It was enlightening.
If anybody has questions, feel free to reach out to us.
Excellent. I forgot to mention that, but thanks for catching that.
I think we have we have a slide that'll show you how to get a hold of me. Feel free anytime to reach out. smoberg@cecinfo.com or give me a call.
So from Lab 46 and everyone at CEC, we thank you.